Hello everybody, I'd like you to welcome to the channel my good friend Ella. Hello Ella.
Hello.
She's here to present today's episode of Next Slide, please.
So, hi, in addition to being Rachel's very good friend, I am a podcast producer at the BBC, and they are said in that order of importance. I also really like audio drama and just generally nerdy podcasts.
We're very excited to see you today, and we're very excited to hear your presentation.
Thank you. My presentation actually brings up the other thing I do, which is that I have a degree in medieval Welsh literature and history, which is what I want to talk to you about today, because, you know, my careers advisors told me that medieval Welsh would never be useful in the employment sphere, and I'm proving them wrong.
Well, I mean, this isn't exactly employment.
Wait, sorry, have we not discussed this?
Oh shit.
Oh yeah, 15 grand for this episode, right?
No, this is actually also just because, as Rach knows, and I think that you might know as well, I just have a lot of very strong feelings about the Welsh and Welsh culture, and that we should all know a little bit more about it. So hopefully, by the end of today, you will all have learned something cool about Wales, theoretically. Okay, so I'm here today to explain to you why medieval Wales was a good time, with the help of Culhwch ag Olwen, one of the oldest Arthurian stories in the world. Also, there are zombies and a giant pig, who isn't that crucial to the story, but I just really love the pig, so I found a picture of a wild boar.
So zombies and pigs.
Zombies, pigs, princesses, giants, knights, the underworld, also really bad experiences with customer services. It's got everything.
Well, I'm excited for zombies and pigs especially.
Are there zombie pigs?
Tragic. Well, I mean, I guess, you know, at what point does a pig become a zombie? If it is the size of a house and has poisonous spines and cannot be killed by any known weapon, is it undead? Question? Who knows? Maybe. We'll find out. So, before we get further in, I just kind of need to make this PSA because I feel very strongly about it. King Arthur is Welsh. All of Arthurian legend is Welsh. It's not English. You get a lot of people saying that the origin of Arthurian legends is a massive mystery. It's not a mystery. The mystery comes from English and American academics who are trying to prove that Arthurian legends is English, and there is no proof of that because it's not, because it's Welsh.
Oh shit.
Yeah!
I had no
At it
idea.
again.
I had no idea.
This is my bombshell. So what I think is really important with Arthurian legends, and the reason, in my opinion, a lot of Arthurian adaptations flop, is that Arthurian legends were deliberately created by a country under occupation. So they were actually a story of specifically indigenous sovereignty. The people of Wales are the Britons, are the indigenous people of Britain. And they were telling stories about King Arthur. And we've got accounts from the 1100s, from the 1000s, about Welsh princes telling stories of Arthur coming back to rule the Britons as a story of one day Wales will be free again and independent and not under control by invasion or by hostile forces. So the whole narrative of that, like, everything goes to hell and then everything comes back again and one day we'll be free and everything will be good, that is the story of an occupied nation. It's not about a blonde with a sword. And a lot of people really misunderstand that.
I suppose it kind of makes
That's
sense because
really
Arthur and Merlin both sound very Welsh names.
Merlin does
Yeah,
sound
like-
like a really Welsh name.
Yeah, Merlin originally is Myrddin, which is Myrddin, which
I know-
then gets anglicised into Merlin.
I also know that Jennifer comes from Guinevere.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Yes,
Which
which
was
means white
originally
witch.
Yes, which was originally Gwenhwyfar, which again, Welsh name that got anglicised. See, the Normans really liked Welsh stories and Arthurian stories. In fact, actually, if you'll allow me a brief digression, the Normans were so threatened by the story of King Arthur as a parable of Welsh independence that Norman kings pretended to bury King Arthur. So they fully, like, held a funeral for King Arthur and were like, no, he can't come back and rule the Britons again because he's totally dead, definitely dead. We've got him in a grave, you can visit it. Lots of people didn't buy that. So the other story that was publicised by Henry I was that was that when Arthur was going to be buried, his knights couldn't carry the coffin into the church because his shoulders were just so broad that the coffin was too wide to go through the door.
Oh,
and
he's a
during the
wide body,
mass,
is he? A wide
He was
boy.
a wide boy. He was a chonky boy. And during the mass, there was a flash flood in which no one apparently was watching the once and future king, and his coffin got swept away in a flood. And according to Norman King Henry I, this is why you can't find the body of King Arthur, because they lost him. Can you imagine, like, being the person responsible for that? Like, where did the king go? Oh, I don't know, I didn't look for him.
Have they checked under a car park?
I mean, you know what? Honestly, it's but like there is this whole thing about King Arthur being Welsh, like, and this, the propagation of the myth that we don't know where Arthurian legend comes from, that really destroys and hides Welsh culture. Like, English academics especially cannot accept that this, like, seminal, foundational, epic myth is not English. It is made by the Welsh. It was Welsh culture. It was Welsh storytelling. And I think actually the thing that's really powerful about it, and the reason it comes back again and again and again and again, is because what Arthurian legend actually is about the secrets that we tell each other through stories and songs. And it's about the myths that we pass on to our children, and they pass on to their children, and they pass on to their children. And it's about, like, the immortality of dream and hope, and an indigenous population imagining that one day they'll be free again. And anyway, side note, King Arthur is Welsh. Come at me.
That's so interesting as well, the, like, double-edged, like, admiration of King Arthur in even in this story of, like, trying to cover up his, like, trying to insist that he's dead. Like, they're like, his shoulders are too broad to fit into the church. Like, he's too powerful. And at the same time, he is definitely dead and he won't come back, and it's all over for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, like, to get real for a second, that one of the worst things that happened, like, in this whole saga was that with the murder of the last Prince of Wales in the 1100s, they chopped off his head. His name was Llewellyn ap Griffith. They chopped off his head and put it on a spike outside the Tower of London and crowned it with ivy, and a crowd appeared outside to shout, "Look, King of the Britons," in a specific reference to the Welsh belief that one day Wales will be independent again. I also do think it's important to note that by the time, so the Normans conquered England in 1066, and then, like, within 10 years they'd mopped it up. It was easy. It took them 200 years to conquer Wales, because the way that the Normans won the war against the English, which was castles and cavalry, doesn't really work in mountains against guerrilla warfare.
No.
So it took them way, way, way longer to conquer Wales. But by the time that they eventually did, and they murdered Llewellyn ap Griffith, at that point, Wales, even though, like, countries didn't exist in the way that we think of them now, like, in the medieval era, obviously, and, like, boundaries and borders and stuff weren't exactly the same, and there were multiple kingdoms within Wales, like Powys and Gwynedd, what's interesting about Wales is that the Welsh were recognising themselves as a group of nations who were all culturally Welsh before, way, way, way before the various kingdoms of the Anglo-Saxon England were seeing themselves as English, right? And so by the time that the last Prince of Wales was murdered in, I think the 1170s, but it might be the 80s, Wales had existed as a self-recognising culture and identity for longer than England has existed now.
Wow. So what you're saying is they're kind of hipsters.
Yeah. The Welsh are the original hipsters of the British Isles. They're just too cool. But yeah. Anyway, back to the presentation. So Cilwch ag Olwen is arguably the oldest Arthurian legend, and one of the oldest Welsh prose stories surviving to us. It's found in the Red Book of Hergest and the White Book of Rhydderch, which also, just digression, the three oldest Welsh manuscripts are these and the Black Book of Carmarthen, and I think that those are just really good names. Due to the language that Cilwch ag Olwen is written in, we think that it might come from the 11th century, but some scholars think it's more modern and others think it's older. And another really important thing to factor in here is that most medieval stories had a really long life, being passed on orally, so being memorised and being spoken aloud before they got written down. So there's a strong chance that, like, versions of Cilwch ag Olwen are much older, but we just don't really have any way to prove or track that. In the same way that, like, Beowulf might be based on a much older story, but it's only when we get the manuscript that it's, like, written down in a way we can date.
Yeah.
The fact that Cilwch ag Olwen was performed originally is really crucial to understanding what it is, because it is objectively really funny. And it took the English like 300 years to figure that out. Like, genuinely, straight up, took them centuries to get the joke. So yeah, it's important to bear in mind. Yeah, very, very, very much, you know, like, my reflexes are too fast, nothing gets past me, it's just the English, the sense of humour, it's over there. The next digression is that Ciarán Mac Colin is part of the 4 branches of the Mabinogi, also known as the Mabinogion due to a translation error by Lady Charlotte Guest. The Mabinogion are the oldest collection of Welsh stories in the world, and they are completely ridiculous and very, very fun. They feature golden rings that turn you invisible, zombie armies, disembodied hands, talking birds, time travel, and a chessboard-esque thing called a gwyddbwyll with living pieces that strike each other like tiny carved soldiers when you move them across the board, which may or may not be familiar as a concept to you.
But also, and rings that turn you invisible.
Yeah, rings that turn you invisible. So
That's
Tolkien
the thing,
takes
isn't it?
Yeah, so actually Tolkien's Tolkien had a kind of fictional historical thing that he said that his that the Lord of the Rings was based on, and his fictional source was called the Red Book of Westmarch, and that was a specific naming convention following the Red Book of Hergest. And then, yeah, for sure, the invisibility ring is straight up. That's from the 4 branches. There's a lot of really cool 4 branches stuff that makes its way into pop culture because they're these really powerful and interesting ideas. And bearing in mind that you've got this happening, like, I mean, it's written down in the 1200s, and it might have been like being spoken between like the 800s and the 1000s. I mean, 800s is quite early, but I like to dream. But like at least 1,000 years ago, it was being like spoken about and performed. But some of the stories in the Mabinogion are like, oh yes, the immortal fairy queen of birds and her lover and their friends accidentally touch a fountain which transports them millennia through time, and they see the entirety of their civilization change, and then they have to force themselves to let go and give up immortality, which is just a cool concept.
Well, I think it's because they saw 2021.
That's what gave them the strength to let go of the fountain.
Yeah.
They're just like, let's end this
I don't want to live to that year.
Yeah, I mean 1,000%. Also, this person on this horse is the giant Bran, with unfortunately his dead nephew after a battle outside a castle in Wales. And we like Bran because Bran is super anti-domestic violence. So he's a good egg.
By the way, I really love the word Mabinogion.
Yeah, I love that.
It's very good.
Yeah, it's a really fun word. There are some words that are really unpleasant to hear, and some words that are really like nice to hear, and that's one of the nice ones.
Yeah. So now I've given you many digressions and lots of context that I'm sure that you needed. It's time to tell you the actual story of Ciarán Mac Colin. So I hope that this slide is extremely instructional and gives you a great deal of information about what's about to happen. All right. So, also just a heads up, there is going to be audience participation. All right. Once upon a time, the Queen went crazy and gave birth in a pig pen. Classic beginning to a story. And I mean, you know, like, she was on a walk, she sees a pig pen, she goes inside, she gives birth, she carries on her day, it's a whole thing.
You do what you gotta do.
You know, like, she's a working woman, she's got things to do, she's working 9 to 5. For similarly, like, unclear reasons, the king, because of this, maybe, not sure, decides to then have his son, the crown prince, raised by a swineherd whilst he gets remarried to someone else. For reasons. There's not much lingered on at this point. When Prince Ciarán returns to his father's court, his stepmother is really determined to make him marry his stepsister. And Ciarán is like, say no to incest, and refuses to do it.
I agree with that statement.
I'm glad that you're in support. But unfortunately, Ciarán's stepmother was not a fan, and so she curses him to only be able to marry the most beautiful woman in all the land. Which, like, as curses
What a
go,
curse.
you know, not that bad.
Curse me, stepmother.
Oh no, that's taken my brain down a whole path of memes. Except that, unfortunately, the most beautiful woman in the land is called Olwen, and her father is an evil giant called Ysbyddaden, who is cursed to die as soon as his daughter gets married. Despite having never actually met Olwen, Keylok instantly falls madly in love with her. Just like fully, just stupid in love with her, never met the woman, doesn't know anything about her. But when he does meet her, by like sheer force of coincidence or perhaps shared lack of brain cell, Olwen also is completely in love with Keylok. So, you know, works out narratively. So they ask Ysbyddaden if they can get married. Ysbyddaden obviously doesn't want to say yes because of the whole insta-death on Olwen's marriage thing, so instead he sets Keylok a list of about 40 impossible tasks to complete before he can marry Olwen. At this point in the manuscript, the scribe lists all 40 of the tasks in detail. So this... this is the part where audience participation is going to come in. So this is from an excerpt of Keylok og Olwen, translated by Will Parker on keylok.info, which they made freely available for people like me, so thank you, Will. And yeah, so what I'm going to be Ysbyddaden, and all three of you are going to be Keylok.
Okay.
And every time I say something, set you a challenge, you have to reply with something like, that's easy, or like, no sweat, or like, whatever, I could do that in my sleep, or like something like that. Does that make sense? Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay. I will need to soften my stubble before my shave. It will never soften unless you can get the blood of the very black witch, daughter of the very white witch, from the valley of desolation in the uplands of hell.
Oh, I did that yesterday, innit? Did it already.
Piece of piss.
Oh, alright, fine. Well, you might get that, but the blood will not be effective unless it is put on hot. There is no vessel in the world that can keep the heat of the liquid inside it except the bottles of Gwyddolwyn Gore, which keep the heat of the liquid inside them all the way from the east to the west. He will not give it freely, nor can you force him.
My grandmother's knees can do that in their sleep.
Yeah. My grandmother's knees.
Well, fine, so you might get that, but some will want milk. There is no way of getting milk to everybody without getting the bottles of Rhin on Rhin Barfog. No liquid in them ever goes sour, and he will not give it freely, nor can he be compelled.
Oh, yes, he will.
Well, fine. Well, you might get that, but there's no comb and shears in the world with which my beard can be trimmed because of its stiffness, except the comb and shears that are between the ears of Turk Truith, son of Tara Druedig.
Oh, Truth,
Just say the first thing that comes to your mind, Rach. Just say it.
I can.
It's the best thing. I'll get them easy.
No, fine, you might get that, but Turk Truith cannot be hunted until Dridwen, the whelp of Graid, son of Eri, is obtained.
Oh, well, I'll do that then.
Oh, he's a pushover.
Oh, well, there's no leash in the world that can hold him except the leash of course Cantioen.
Just as well I met him last week.
Well, you might have done, but there is no collar in the world that can hold the leash apart from the collar of Canhastia Canclap.
Just go get it, innit? Oh, wait,
Well,
no, he's
you
Welsh.
need
Oh, I just go get it. Tet and tet.
You need the chain of killer Canhastia to hold the collar and the leash.
No worries,
Checkmate.
but it's mine.
Alright, well, you might get all of that, but there is no hunter in the world who can handle that dog except Mabon, son of Modron, who was taken from his mother when he was 3 nights old. No one knows where he is or what he is, whether he is alive or dead.
Who do you think took him from his mother?
Amazing. So I'm not going to go further than that, but there are 40.
I fully thought you were. After about the thought, I was like, is this just going to go on?
But I hope you have now got a sense of how ridiculously long and painstaking and needlessly contrived this list is.
I love how much it just revolved around his beard as well.
Yeah, right? Like, it's very, very, very silly. So at this point, Keylok does the only practical thing that he can do. He goes to Cornwall and visits the underworld to see King Arthur, his uncle. After some shenanigans with the gatekeeper, Keylok makes Arthur give him a haircut. In exchange, Arthur rents him 6 nights. Rent a night. At this point, however, it's necessary for the scribe to list every member of King Arthur's court. Now, bearing in mind what's just happened with the tasks, how do you think this goes?
Is it long?
Slowly.
Yeah. So here is an excerpt And don't worry, it will end, because I only picked the first 3 paragraphs. I also have to apologise to anyone who knows Welsh watching, because my spoken Welsh is not great. But here we go. This is just to give you guys an idea. So I want you to know this is 3 paragraphs. It goes on for more than 10 pages. I'm not doing the whole thing, but I just want, this is to simulate for you the experience of sitting in a mead hall, listening to this goddamn bard just going on. So here we go. Get ready to hate me, your bard. Thus he invoked his boon in the name of Cai and Bedwyr and Graidol Gai Ddofed, and Gwythiad son of Graidol and Graid son of Eri, and Cyndyrig Gyfanwydd and Cathal Twysgolau, and Maelwys son of Baidan, and Cancwyr son of Nes, and Cubit son of Daira, and Fergus Mabok, and Cleba Baitach, and Corfil Befach, and Gwyn son of Esli, and Gwyn son of Newford, and Gwyn son of Nydd, and Erin son of Nydd, and Cawi son of Graid, and Llwyddyr fam Ledig, and Round son of Dorath, and Radwen son of Moen Mainog, and Moen Mainog himself, and Dachdaf I Comin Cov, and the son of Alan Dyfed, and the son of Saidif, and the son of Gwrion and Ictrid Adwiad Cad, and Canwas Corfagi, and Gwria Gwathagfras, and Isberia Urgath, and Gacthway Goffiniad, and Wacken Rafach, and Nertach sons of Gwardia Tafach, from the uplands of Hell where those men sprung.
Consider Gogok.
And kill it. I can do that. And Anwas Ioniog, and Sinok son of Seifed, and Warai son of Seifed, and Nau son of Seifed, and Gwenwyn son of Nau son of Seifed, and Beyu son of Seifed, and Iona, king of France, and Sel, son of Selgi, and Terigid, son of Ien, and Cilien, son of Ien, and Bradwen, son of Ien, and Moren, son of Ien, and Sean, son of Ien, and Caradog, son of Ien, men of Caertathil were they, Arthur's kindred on his father's side.
Wow. Some of those people had like a lot of kids.
Yeah. I enjoy the ones that have lots of kids. I enjoy that the King of France is just there.
Yeah.
So that as well.
Hanging
Chilling
out.
in Wales.
I also enjoy that in the first paragraph they're like, oh, these people are from the uplands of Hell. Just
Yeah.
no
Uplands of Hell.
context. So this goes on for several pages, 16 paragraphs of which that was 3, but it includes a lot of fun nonsense for people paying attention, including Suckin Mag Sucknedet, Suck son of Sucker, Oc Agarem a Diasbad, Alas Scream and Yell, Draw a Gwaithaf, Bad and Worst, Cleast Mab Clestainat, Ear son of Hera, Medier Map Methreaded, Aim son of Aimer, and Ol Mab Olwyd, Track son of Tracker, and so on.
So are these all just jokes? Are they all just joke names? They're all just fake
Was Bad and
puns?
Worse a movie?
Good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, I was thinking of Dumb and Dumber.
Enjoy the divergence of genre there, but yes, both were movies available to 11th century Welsh poets. Yeah, no, but actually, Jen, you're exactly right. That's the thing. So this is the key debate about Cilach ag Olwen, is that for a really long time English academics thought the Welsh were just really stupid. They were like, but do they not understand that this is boring? It's just a list of names. Do they not know how drama works? And it's but in reality, it has all of these kind of fun little bits and tidbits and jokes. And bearing in mind also that this is within a context of Arthuriana, right? And these kinds of courtly stories. And so all courtly stories include extremely long genealogies of every single hero, and a list of the court, and a list of the background of the magical item and where you have to go and all the challenges you have to do. And this is taking that to its most extreme degree, but it's making it absurd by having Bad and Worst, by having most of the tasks be about giving someone a haircut. And it's clearly supposed to be stupid on purpose, but for literally for more than 300 years, English academics were they clearly didn't know what they were doing. This was clearly just, they were just so stupid.
Bad stories.
You know? So many of the people in that list are also defined by their exploits at the Battle of Kamlan, which means that all of them are zombies.
Ah!
And so you get these fun little things that would have been really dynamic in a performed setting that don't always come across as well in text, if you're assuming that the text is supposed to be taken 100% seriously as a piece of drama. So Cilach and Arthur's knights go and start trying to do those 40 impossible tasks. And they spend most of their time hunting Truith, who is a giant pig with poisonous spines that can run faster than a horse and is about the size of a building. Many of them die whilst they hunt it up and down Britain, but eventually they manage to pull a comb out of its back, at which point it escapes by jumping into the Irish Sea and just swimming away. You read, a good 40 pages of them chasing this boar, and then at the end it's just bye! And off goes the pig. At this point, Cilach and the knights go to give Ysbyddaden a shave, as he do, and it's whilst they're doing this that they realise that instead of doing 40 impossible, life-threatening tasks, they could just kill the giant. So they kill him, and Cilach and Olwen get married, The end.
Olwen's still totally down after her dad's just been murdered.
Oh yeah, she's for sure down with it. She does.
But then
not
I
like
guess
her.
she knew her dad was gonna die anyway, did she?
I mean, it's one of those prophecy things, right? Like, did he die because he was so determined not to die that he caused them to kill him, or
Yeah. By trying to avoid the thing, you do the thing. It's a paradox, isn't it? Oh wow! So it probably is like a paradox.
Yeah. Let's talk about the zombies. So the Battle of Kamlan is the civil war in which between Arthur and Lancelot over Guinevere, in which Arthur's entire court managed to mutually annihilate each other. They are all dead. It's like one of those plays where everyone's dead at the end. That's what happens. Battle of Kamlan, that's the end. And Arthur's son by his sister, Morgan Le Fay, the son Mordred, kills him with his own sword because he lost Excalibur's sheath despite Marathon's explicit instructions, like the dumbass that he was. So the big takeaway here is that no one survived the Battle of Kamlan, except for, like, 3 saints, Guinevere and Lancelot, who felt totes guilty about the whole annihilation of a prosperous and peaceful kingdom, and ended up dying separately. Although Lancelot did get buried with his boyfriend Galahad, so good for him.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
I'd never heard that.
Lancelot is bisexual. You heard it here first. So what's really fun about this is I'm going to introduce you, if you aren't already familiar with it, to the concept of the homosocial. This is the word that straight academics use when things are totally gay, but they don't want to admit they're gay, so they say it's homosocial instead. It was different back then. You could kiss someone 100 times naked in bed and it was for sure platonic. Definitely not gay. That's what I do with all my friends. It's a homosocial relationship, right? And so with Galahad and Lancelot, what happens is Lancelot defeats Galahad. Galahad's like, oh my god, this is the best person I've ever met. Galahad immediately decides that he's going to die for Lancelot, gives everything to him. Fast forward a couple days, Galahad does a strange ceremony, which is the practice of his country, in which he dresses both himself and Lancelot in golden silk robes that are extremely expensive and goes around to everyone introducing Lancelot as the person with whom he will spend the rest of his life and die for. And then at that night they're lying... right? And then that night they're lying in bed naked together and Galahad is kissing like Lancelot's cheeks and lips. But this is
just friends.
Just friends.
They literally just got married and had sex and it's just friends. Cool.
Yeah. And then
I wasn't
when
expecting this to be a saucy presentation.
We provide everything here. But when Lancelot decides to go back to Guinevere, Galahad dies of a broken heart. Guinevere retires to a nunnery, and Lancelot also retires. But when he dies, he has his bones buried with Galahad's. So yeah, fun fact: Lancelot was dying. So coming back to Cilach Olwen, Battle of Kamlan. Everyone dies. In the extremely long court list, which we went through, a lot of people in Arthur's court are defined by their exploits at the Battle of Kamlan. Like Morvran Aeltegid, no man laid a weapon upon him at Kamlan because of his ugliness. Everyone thought he was a demon fighting alongside them. And Santhe Pryd Angel, no man laid a spear upon him at Kamlan because of his beauty. Everyone thought he was an angel fighting alongside them. What this essentially means is that everyone on the list, including King Arthur, are dead. Hence the zombie army, which I just really enjoy. The English have no sense of humour. So, I want you to imagine you're a medieval Welsh noble. You're chilling in court and you spend a lot of time listening to increasingly over-the-top stories about Arthurian and Arthurian-esque characters going on magical quests and ridiculously long tangents about their family history, the origins of whatever magical object or problem they're solving, and other such fun. And then some bard steps up and starts the story of Cilach Olwen, where Cilach is born in a pig pen and falls in love with a girl so pretty that everywhere she walks, white flowers grow. And then the bard starts singing a list of tasks in the super gruff, deep voice of Ysbyddaden, including increasingly ridiculous requirements for a haircut. This goes on for 20 minutes. And then Cilach gets locked outside of King Arthur's court in the rain after having an argument with customer services. And then the bard starts singing a 30-minute long list of every possible member of King Arthur's court, except that they keep dropping little bombs like scream and yell and ear, and also the fact that all of these warriors are zombies. And then the court list is over and they start doing the tasks, and you definitely know how this part goes, so it's a classic courtly tale. So you settle in with a flagon of mead for what is going to be like 3 hours of snooze-inducing, needlessly contrived shenanigans, interspersed with occasional angsting about moral purity and the nature of civilization. Except that halfway through that, Arthur's knights take on a pig the size of a house with poisonous spines, nearly fall off a cliff, give a giant a haircut, and then kill said giant and call it a day. This is deliberately ridiculous, but for over 300 years, English academics were convinced that Culhwch ag Olwen is just really stupid, and that the dozens or even hundreds of Welsh people who led to it getting written down in 2 different manuscripts, which is an extremely expensive and time-consuming task. The English decided that, like, what was more likely was that every Welsh person who had ever encountered the story was just really, really dumb and didn't understand how stories worked, rather than the possibility that maybe they were missing something. In reality, Culhwch ag Olwen is an at times hilarious, genuinely exciting, and even frightening Arthurian story of knights and ghosts and monsters that is very consciously taking the mick out of other similar medieval tales that would have been performed in courts at the time across Europe. And I love it very much.
That was so great, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't wish to disparage where I come from, but I do wish to disparage where I come from. English people are not very clever, are they?
Yeah, no. But it also makes me think, like, obviously we are all probably not as familiar with medieval courtly literature as someone living in the 1100s was. But we all probably have some rough idea of what, like, Tolkien and Lord of the Rings is like. And that is kind of, like, quite analogous to this. And so, like, I don't know if any of you have ever read the Lord of the Rings books, but they're very slow and very dense. And that is really reflective of what courtly literature was like at the time. And Culhwch ag Olwen is specifically taking the piss out of stories that are so needlessly long and boring and detailed. And it's like, oh man, can you imagine if I just stood here for half an hour and only told you names? That would be crazy, right?
Parody, basically. Parody's lowest form of comedy, that parody, that's what they say.